The insult landed so quietly it almost didn't register. Soft voice, sharp words, a blade wrapped in polite Christmas cheer. "I truly don't understand why my son married you, Addison." Judith said it as casually as if she were commenting on the centerpiece. But the room stilled. The air warmed by roasting ham and holiday candles suddenly felt pointed and cold. My fork hovered above my plate, the green beans sliding back onto porcelain untouched. Judith looked perfect as always, hair arranged with mathematical precision, pearl necklace gleaming like a visible reminder of how high she sat above everyone at that table. "Your dessert was ambitious," she added. "Perhaps next year, choose something within your skill level." I had tried to explain that the dessert was my grandmother's recipe. A sentimental gesture. That was my mistake. Judith lunged at vulnerability the way some people reach for salt. Her comment wasn't what stunned me. It was Tyler's reaction, or rather, his complete lack of one. He kept cutting his ham, jaw ticking with irritation, not at his mother, at me. "Tyler," I whispered, heart thudding. "Did you hear what she said?" He sighed, the sigh of a man inconvenienced. "Addison, can you not start something? It's Christmas." "Start something?" The word scraped out of me. She insulted me in front of everyone. Across the table, Judith lifted her wineglass with the satisfied smugness of someone who'd scored a point she considered long overdue. "Some people simply don't handle feedback well," she said, eyes sparkling. I looked around for anyone, any witness to say this wasn't normal. But everyone behaved like extras in Judith's play. Patricia inspected her napkin. Bradley whispered to his wife. Howard stared at his plate as though salvation lay in the mashed potatoes. "That wasn't feedback," I said. "It was cruelty." Tyler finally turned toward me. His gaze wasn't just cold. It was foreign. "Addison, you're overreacting. Mom's entitled to her opinion. If you can't handle a simple dinner without drama, maybe you should step outside and cool off." Something in me snapped. Quietly, decisively. Not anger. Not tears. Just clarity. Silence is not peace. I had kept silent for years, mistaking endurance for harmony. But this moment, the smug curl of Judith's mouth, Tyler's chilling indifference, showed me exactly where I stood. "You want me to leave?" I asked. "I want you to stop blowing things out of proportion." I rose, placing my napkin down with deliberate care. "You're right," I said softly. "I will leave." Judith's smile flickered, satisfaction tinged with surprise, as though she hadn't expected me to actually stand. I retrieved my coat. Tyler called after me. "Addison, come on. Don't be dramatic." But the cold December night outside felt more honest than that warm, deceptive dining room. Snow drifted under the streetlights as I walked to my car, breath clouding in the air. I wasn't leaving because of one insult. I was leaving because the last illusion had finally cracked. Silence is not peace. It's surrender. And I was done surrendering. Addison thinks she understands the betrayal, but an earlier wound, one she never knew existed, is about to surface and change everything. I checked into a modest hotel near the waterfront, the kind of place meant for layovers or quiet escapes. The heater hummed, the floral comforter scratched faintly, but for the first time in a long while, I felt space around me. Breathing room. The mantra echoed. Silence is not peace. I sat on the edge of the bed replaying the dinner scene, but then, like a curtain pulling back, I saw older moments differently. The subtle shifts after we married. The suggestions Tyler made that sounded like requests but felt like rules. The way he always said I was too sensitive, too literal, too emotional. But the betrayal I thought had culminated at dinner hadn't even been the beginning. My phone buzzed. It was Brooke. I answered, and as soon as she heard my voice, she said, "Addison, what happened?" The question broke something open in me. I told her. All of it. She listened without interrupting. Then, with a hesitance I didn't immediately understand, she said, "There's something I didn't tell you. Something I should have." My pulse quickened. "What is it?" "You remember Elena? Tyler's cousin's friend. The one you met once at the barbecue." I vaguely recalled her. Warm smile, observant eyes. "She told me something months ago," Brooke continued. "I didn't know how to bring it up then." "Brooke, tell me." She inhaled sharply. "They used to talk about you behind your back." Tyler and Judith. They joked that you were temporary. That he'd eventually realize he deserved someone better. My throat closed. He said that. Yes, she whispered. And he wasn't defending you. He was participating. The room blurred. This betrayal, this earlier secret betrayal, was deeper than the Christmas insult. It was deliberate. Sustained. It meant he'd never taken my side even privately. Brooke hesitated. There's more. Elena said Judith tried the same thing with his previous girlfriend. Drove her into a breakdown. Tyler didn't stop her then either. Piece by piece, the puzzle reshaped itself. Judith's hostility wasn't random. It was strategic. And Tyler wasn't a bystander. He was complicit. This wasn't about one argument or even years of discomfort. It was a pattern older than me. Why didn't you tell me? I asked quietly. Because you loved him. And I didn't want to hurt you unless you were ready to see it. Tears pricked my eyes. Not from heartbreak, but from recognition. I had been fighting for a marriage whose foundation had been broken long before I entered it. After we hung up, I stared at my phone. Tyler had texted again. Come home when you've calmed down. We need to discuss your behavior. A bitter laugh escaped me. My behavior. The truth hit with sharp clarity. He'd never loved me in the way I needed to be loved. He'd loved the version of me that didn't challenge his mother. He'd loved the silence. But silence is not peace. I wiped my tears and stood. The decision wasn't emotional anymore. It was practical. Necessary. I wasn't going back. Addison has decided to leave, but Tyler is about to create a confrontation that will test her new resolve in a way she never expected. By late afternoon the next day, I drove back to the apartment. Not to return, but to retrieve the pieces of myself still stored there. The building felt unfamiliar, as though the walls already sensed the shift. I unlocked the door and froze. Tyler was inside. He stood in the middle of the living room, hands on his hips, pacing like a man waiting to interrogate someone. When he saw me, relief flashed across his face, but not the tender kind. More like the relief of someone regaining control of a narrative slipping away. Finally, he said. You scared everyone. Mom's beside herself. Is that why you're here? I asked. To manage appearances? His jaw tightened. I'm here because my wife stormed out over nothing. Nothing. My voice was steady. Your mother insulted me publicly, and you backed her. I didn't back her. I stayed neutral. You blew it out of proportion as usual. My hands shook. Not with fear but with certainty. Neutrality in the face of cruelty is choosing a side. He scoffed. You sound ridiculous. Silence settled. A dangerous kind. Our marriage had lived in these silences, fed on them, survived because I had mistaken them for peace. No more. I'm here to pack my things, I said. Tyler stepped forward. Addison. Stop. Don't turn this into something irreversible. It already is. He stared at me, confusion flickering into anger. So that's it? You're walking out because Mom offended you. This isn't about one comment, I said. It's about the years of comments you ignored. The way you laughed about me behind my back. His face drained of color. What? Elena heard you. More than once. You told your mother I was temporary. That you were stuck with me. For a moment, panic flashed across his features, quick and unguarded. Then he masked it with indignation. She misunderstood. People twist things. No, I said softly. You twist things. The room thickened with tension. He stepped closer, lowering his voice to a dangerous softness. If you walk out that door, don't expect me to chase after you. I'm not asking you to. He blinked, thrown off by my calm. I moved to the bedroom and began pulling my clothes, books, and documents into suitcases. He followed, hovering near the doorway like a shadow unable to touch me. Addison, you're making a mistake. No, I said, zipping a suitcase. I made the mistake 5 years ago when I mistook silence for love. He grabbed my wrist, not hard, but firmly enough that my breath hitched. You're not leaving. Something inside me crystallized. Not fear. Power. I pulled my arm free. Yes, I am. He stared at me, genuinely stunned, as if he'd never imagined a version of me with boundaries sharp enough to cut through his expectations. Within an hour, my suitcases were in the car. I left my wedding ring on the counter, not as a symbol of heartbreak, but closure. When I walked out, Tyler didn't follow. The click of the apartment door behind me felt final. Silence is not peace. And walking away from that silent home felt like reclaiming breath after years underwater. Addison has escaped the house, but the next unexpected call will reveal a deeper layer of the family's history and ignite the next phase of her transformation. 2 days into my stay at the hotel, my phone lit up with a number I didn't recognize. I almost let it ring out. The last thing I needed was more noise from Tyler's orbit. But the call wouldn't go to voicemail. Something, intuition or caution, made me answer. "Addison?" a woman asked. "Yes. This is Elena. We met once at Bradley's barbecue." Her voice carried a steadiness I hadn't expected, like someone calling with purpose, not curiosity. "I heard what happened at Christmas," she said. "And Brooke told me you left." I breathed out slowly. "I did. I'm glad," she said simply. Her certainty startled me. Before I could respond, she continued, "There's something you should know. And I'm saying this now because you're finally in a place where you might believe it." That line made my pulse spike. "Go on." "Judith has done this to every woman Tyler ever dated seriously," she said. "She pushes, pressures, isolates. She sabotages. Not because of anything wrong with them, but because losing influence over Tyler terrifies her." Elena paused, then added, "She did it to me too." I sat upright. "You and Tyler?" "Yes, years ago," she said. "We weren't serious yet, but Judith saw potential and went on the attack. She told him I wasn't ambitious enough, then told me I was too ambitious. She whispered doubts until he no longer knew which instincts were his own." My breath faltered. "He let her." "He did what he always does," Elena said gently. "He avoided conflict. And avoidance became agreement. There it was. The pattern. Clean. Damning. Undeniable. And it wasn't just the sabotage," Elena added quietly. "She said things about you recently. Cruel things. And Tyler didn't correct her. He nodded. Sometimes he laughed." A sharp ache rose in my throat, not heartbreak, but the sting of realizing just how little ground I'd ever actually stood on. Elena's voice softened. "I'm not telling you this to hurt you, Addison. I'm telling you because I wish someone had told me." Silence stretched between us. Not the suffocating silence of Judith's dining table. This one felt clarifying, instructive. "Thank you," I said. The words weren't an apology. They were acknowledgement. "You didn't fail," Elena said. "You were set up to lose the moment you entered that house." After the call, I sat quietly, letting the truth settle. Judith's cruelty hadn't been personal in the way I once feared. It was formulaic. Predictable. Born of insecurity so deep it poisoned every relationship her son tried to build. Fear of irrelevance. That was Judith's core motive. It didn't excuse her, but it explained her relentlessness. And Tyler. He had grown up learning that peace meant pleasing his mother, not protecting the woman beside him. Silence is not peace. It never had been. It was compliance disguised as harmony. I looked around the hotel room, plain walls, mismatched lamps, and felt something surprising, relief. Relief that the truth was out. Relief that the mask had fallen. The life I'd been clinging to had never actually existed. Not the way I imagined it. Now finally I could choose something real. With the truth exposed, Addison prepares to rebuild. But Tyler isn't done intruding, and his next move will raise the stakes in a way she never expected. Leaving the apartment felt like stepping out of a long, dim tunnel. My new rental, small, sunlit, and blissfully quiet, became my refuge. I furnished it minimally. A bed, a table, a soft chair in the corner. Enough to feel human again. I took 2 days off work. Not to fall apart. There was surprisingly little falling apart left to do, but to plan next steps with a clear head. Filing for divorce wasn't an emotional decision anymore. It was a necessary one. I blocked Tyler's number after he sent a string of messages alternating between anger and self-pity. But blocking didn't stop him. On the 3rd morning, he showed up at my workplace. Security called before he reached the elevator. Ma'am, there's a man here insisting he needs to see you. He's agitated. My stomach dropped. This was the mid-story tension I hadn't anticipated. A final push from a man who'd never handled losing control. Against my better judgment, I rode the elevator down. I wanted to look him in the eye and end this cleanly. He stood near the lobby windows, disheveled, pacing. When he saw me, he rushed forward. Addison, what the hell are you doing? Everyone is talking. Mom is devastated. You've embarrassed me. His voice echoed the old script. Guilt first, blame second, shame always. What do you want, Tyler? I asked. I want you to come home and stop acting insane, he snapped. No, I said calmly. I'm not coming back. He blinked, stunned by my certainty. You're abandoning your marriage. You abandoned it years ago. I just finally stopped covering for it. His mouth opened, then closed. His hands shook. You're choosing strangers over your own husband? Elena isn't a stranger, I said. She's someone who survived your mother. Just like me. He stepped back as though I'd slapped him. She talked to you? I nodded. And she told me everything. Including what you said about me. What you laughed about. A muscle in his jaw twitched violently. She exaggerated. No, Tyler, I said softly. You minimized. Security began edging closer. They didn't touch him, but they were prepared to intervene. He glanced around, suddenly aware of the audience. Look what you're doing, he hissed. You're causing a scene. I let out a breath that felt like releasing the last of his influence. No, I'm ending one. He stared, uncomprehending. Not because he didn't hear me, but because he had never imagined a world where I could walk away without looking back. Security escorted him out without incident. He didn't fight. He didn't shout. He just looked lost. But lostness isn't the same as remorse. Back upstairs, my coworkers greeted me with quiet support. No probing questions. No judgment. Just presence. Later that afternoon, I called a divorce attorney. Not to wage war. Not to punish. Simply to formalize what had already ended. Silence is not peace. And breaking silence had finally given me my voice back. With Tyler pushed out of her daily life, Addison thinks the worst is behind her. But a letter from an unexpected figure will stir emotions she thought she'd buried for good. The envelope arrived 3 days after the scene at my workplace. Plain, unmarked, slipped through my apartment mailbox as if it carried no significance at all. I nearly tossed it onto the counter unopened. Then I saw the handwriting. Not Tyler's. Not a friend's. But familiar in a way that made my breath snag. Judith. I opened it carefully, bracing myself for venom, denial, or manipulation. But the letter was astonishingly simple. Addison. I'm writing because I know I won't have many chances left. My health is failing. I'm not asking you to visit or forgive me. I just need you to hear this. I was wrong. I pushed you because I couldn't handle losing Tyler's attention. I feared becoming irrelevant. That fear made me cruel. It has ruined far more than your marriage. You deserved better than what I gave you. Better than what he gave you. I hope you find a life untouched by the shadows of this family. Judith. One apology. Clear. Unforced. Honest enough that I didn't question its sincerity. And yet, it didn't make me feel triumphant. It made me feel unexpectedly human. Judith, a woman who once held absolute command over her household, had become a fragile figure confronting her own legacy. I read the letter twice more, letting each line settle without letting it rewrite the past. This was not vindication. It was clarity. When Jonathan came over that evening, bringing soup because he claimed I never ate properly when stressed, he found me sitting quietly on the couch, the letter folded beside me. You okay? He asked. I think so, I replied. She apologized. She actually apologized. He picked up the letter, scanned it, and nodded. And how do you feel about it? I considered the question carefully. Grateful for the honesty, I said. But not changed by it. My healing didn't depend on her. Jonathan's eyes softened. That's growth. I smiled faintly. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just tired. He sat beside me. Both can be true. I rested my head on his shoulder, letting the warmth of the moment settle into the cracks the past had left behind. Judith's apology wasn't a key to any locked door. It was simply a recognition of the truth I had already built my life upon. Silence is not peace. Breaking out of hers had freed me. Breaking out of mine had rebuilt me. Later that night, a second envelope arrived. This one from Howard. The sight of his name sparked something unexpected. Curiosity. Judith's apology brought clarity. But Howard's letter will bring the final piece of a puzzle Addison never realized she needed to complete. Howard's letter was short. 4 lines written in the neat, careful handwriting of a man who had always tried to take up as little space as possible. Addison. I know I failed you by staying silent. I failed many people that way. What Judith did was wrong. What Tyler allowed was wrong. My silence helped it happen. I'm sorry. I hope life gives you the peace you never had in our home. One apology. Quiet. Sparse. But weighty in a way Judith's hadn't been. Judith admitted what she'd done. Howard admitted what he hadn't done. The combined truth painted a fuller picture than I'd ever had. A house maintained through control, fear, and the illusion that conflict avoidance equaled harmony. Silence is not peace. His letter proved it more than anything else. Jonathan read the note with furrowed brows. He sees it now, he said. But seeing doesn't erase what happened. No, I agreed. But maybe it explains it. Howard had always seemed like a man perpetually retreating into himself. His quietness wasn't malicious. It was survival. Living beside a force like Judith meant choosing stillness to avoid triggering storms. I once mistook that stillness for neutrality, even kindness. But neutrality in a system of harm is not harmless. Will you respond? Jonathan asked. I considered the folded note. Yes, I said finally. Not to absolve him. Just to acknowledge his honesty. So I wrote back. Thank you for reaching out. I hope you find peace too. A single sentence. Enough. That night, I slept more deeply than I had in weeks. Not because Judith and Howard apologized. Not because the past felt resolved. But because every truth that had once been hidden was now in the open. And truth, even when painful, is easier to carry than doubt. In the morning, I opened my blinds to the soft winter sun breaking through the clouds. My apartment, still sparsely furnished, felt brighter. It no longer felt like a temporary escape, but the early architecture of a real life. I started building routine again. Work. Coffee. Walks along the river. Phone calls with Brooke. Moments of quiet with Jonathan. My days had structure, not chaos. Purpose, not survival. Yet the reappearance of the past lingered at the edges of my mind. Judith's voice softened by age and regret. Howard's guilt-heavy sentences, Elena's warnings. These weren't ghosts haunting me. They were signposts confirming the direction I'd chosen. I wasn't running from something. I was walking towards something. One evening, Jonathan looked at me over dinner and said, "You look lighter." I feel lighter, I admitted. It's strange. It's like the story finally finished telling itself. He smiled. Or like you finally took control of the narrative. Maybe both. Still, healing isn't tidy. It doesn't arrive in a single moment or letter. It unfolds through dozens of small decisions. To rest, to rebuild, to trust. And sometimes, through one unexpected message. Because just as life began settling again, another email arrived, this time from Elena. Elena's new message doesn't bring more pain. It brings an opportunity Addison never considered, one that might turn her survival into purpose. Elena's email subject line was simple. A thought. Inside was a single paragraph. Addison, I've been thinking about how many women have been through what we did. Different circumstances, same pattern of control and emotional erosion. You have a voice people listen to. If you're willing, I'd like to talk about collaborating on something that could help others recognize the signs earlier. Let me know. I stared at the screen, stunned. Not because of the invitation itself, but because of the timing. I had just begun to feel steady, grounded. The idea of doing something with my story felt both empowering and terrifying. Jonathan walked in with 2 cups of tea, noticed my expression, and set them down. What's going on? Elena wants to start something. Some kind of resource or group for people coming out of emotionally manipulative relationships. He didn't react with hesitation or concern. Just a slow, thoughtful nod. That sounds important. Does it? I asked. Or is it too much too soon? Jonathan smiled. Addison, you've already survived the hardest parts. Sharing what you learned might help someone get out sooner than you did. That matters. His confidence steadied me. I replied to Elena. Let's talk. We met at a cafe 2 days later. The last time I'd seen her had been in passing years ago, before either of us realized how entangled we were in a pattern not of our making. She looked stronger now. Grounded, clear-eyed. And I realized she probably saw the same shift in me. I'm glad you came, she said. I wasn't sure if I could be helpful, I admitted. You already are, she replied. You left. That alone makes you someone others can relate to. We talked for nearly 2 hours, about patterns of control, how subtle emotional manipulation begins, the way isolation creeps into relationships disguised as loyalty. The conversation felt like exhaling something trapped for years. People don't realize silence is a warning sign, Elena said. When conflict disappears completely, it usually means one person has stopped having needs. I nodded. Silence is not peace. It's surrender. She leaned forward. Exactly. And if we can articulate that for people, maybe it will resonate. By the end of the meeting, we had a plan. We would co-author an article series. Short, clear, experience-based guidance for anyone questioning the health of their relationship. Not therapy. Not instruction. Just shared knowledge. When I left the cafe, I felt unexpectedly energized. Helping others didn't reopen my wounds, it reinforced how far I'd come. That evening, as I drafted the first outline, Jonathan looked over my shoulder and said, "You're turning your story into a lighthouse." I smiled. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just refusing to let what happened go to waste. Either way, it felt right. Addison's work begins gaining attention, but one message from an unknown sender threatens to shake her new foundation and test just how strong she's become. 3 weeks into the project with Elena, our first article went live. When silence isn't peace. Early signs of emotional erosion. The response was overwhelming. Comments poured in. Private messages filled my inbox. People shared their own stories, hesitant at first, then more boldly as they realized others understood. One evening, while sorting through emails, I opened a message with no sender name. No subject line. Just a single paragraph. You don't know me, but I know Tyler. I saw your article. And you're right. He never learned to protect anyone but his mother. I left before things got serious, but I saw enough to understand what you survived. I'm glad you got out. Be careful. He's not handling your public voice well. A strange chill slid down my spine. Not fear, awareness. Tyler always cared deeply about perception. The idea that my story, my truth, was circulating publicly would bruise the identity he curated. Jonathan found me staring at the screen. Bad news. Not exactly, I said. Just a reminder. He tilted his head. Is he threatening you? No. But someone thinks he's spiraling because I spoke up. Jonathan set his jaw. If he contacts you again, you let me know. Or the authorities. I nodded. But in truth, Tyler's reaction no longer held much power. A few years earlier, the idea of him not handling it well would have sent me into anxious spirals. Now, it felt more like weather, something outside me, something I could prepare for but didn't have to absorb. Still, the message highlighted an unresolved echo inside me. The fear that telling the truth might somehow pull me backward. That night, I reread all the supportive messages our article had received. Each one countered that fear. This helped me see what I couldn't name. I thought silence meant stability. Now I understand what I was losing. Thank you. I'm leaving tomorrow. Those words grounded me. As I prepared for bed, I realized something essential. What Tyler thought, felt, or resented had no bearing on the life I was building. He could unravel. He could resist. He could deny. That was his journey, not mine. Jonathan wrapped his arm around me. You're safe, he murmured. And you're helping people. Yeah, I whispered. I am. For the first time, saying it felt natural, not tentative. My new life wasn't defined by escape. It was defined by creation. The mantra wasn't just a warning anymore. It had evolved. Silence is not peace. Voice is power. And I intended to keep using mine. But as Addison's influence grows, an unexpected request will arrive. One that forces her to confront the final, unfinished piece of her past. It came late on a Sunday evening as I wrapped up notes for the next article with Elena. My phone buzzed with a voicemail notification. No caller ID, just unknown. I assumed it was spam until I pressed play. A frail voice trembled through the speaker. Addison. It's me. Judith. I sank onto the sofa, pulse tightening. She spoke slowly, breath-catching. I heard about what you're doing. The writing, the advocacy. People are talking. Even in here. A faint exhale. I didn't call to dredge anything up. I know my apology was too late. I know it can't erase anything. She paused long enough for me to hear the faint hum of medical equipment in the background. I'm dying, she said simply. And before I go, I want to ask you something. Not for me, for Tyler. My stomach clenched. No. Absolutely not. But she continued before I could hit delete. He's unraveling. He won't admit it, but he is. My illness. It's breaking him. I spent his whole life teaching him he couldn't function without me. And now he can't. Another pause. I don't expect you to help him. You owe him nothing. But if he reaches out to you, please don't let him drag you back into the old dynamic. He needs to face his pain. Not hand it to someone else. This stunned me. Judith was asking me not to save her son. Not to return, not to soften, not to be the emotional buffer she'd once expected. It was the opposite of every demand she had ever made. Her voice grew faint. I'm telling you this because you were right. Silence isn't peace. Not for him either. He constructed his whole life around avoiding conflict. And now he has nowhere to put it. A soft rasp, like a breath turning into a confession. You didn't deserve what I did to you. And I'm sorry for the damage I helped create in him. I just hope you don't let him use you to avoid his own reckoning. Then the voicemail ended. I sat frozen. The room suddenly too quiet. Not with fear. Not with grief. With clarity. Judith was not asking for redemption. She wasn't even asking for understanding. She was admitting, finally, the legacy she had shaped. Jonathan walked in from the kitchen holding 2 mugs. Everything okay? I handed him the phone. He listened, his expression shifting from tension to astonishment. That's unexpected, he said. It doesn't change anything, I replied. No, he agreed. But it explains everything. Yes. It did. Judith hadn't just feared losing control. She had built Tyler into someone who feared independence. And now, with her fading, he was collapsing under a weight he'd never learned to carry. But that burden was not mine. Silence is not peace. And neither is rescuing someone who refuses to help themselves. I deleted her message, not out of anger, but because it had served its purpose. Judith's story was ending. Mine was not. But Judith's warning proves prophetic. Because the next day, Tyler sends a message that forces Addison to decide how firmly she's willing to guard her new life. The message arrived the next morning. A simple text from a number I hadn't seen since I blocked it. Addison, I need to talk to you. It's important. I stared at it for a long moment. Not because of the words but because of the timing. Judith had warned me this might come. She knew her son better than anyone. I didn't reply. Instead, I took a breath and set the phone down. But 20 minutes later, a second message appeared. Please. You're the only person I can talk to. That line once would have cracked something tender in me. Before, I would have driven home, apologized for breathing incorrectly, tried to hold the weight of a man who never held even a sliver of mine. But that was another life. I texted Elena. He reached out. Her response came instantly. Of course he did. Be careful. Redirect. Don't engage. Before I could decide what redirecting even meant, the phone rang. Tyler calling. Jonathan watched from the doorway of my office. Do you want me to stay? Yes, I said. I answered. What do you want, Tyler? A shaky breath. Mom's dying. I know you know. I don't know what to do. You should get support, I said. Friends, a therapist. I don't have anyone, he snapped. I only ever had you and Mom. And she. His voice cracked. She's leaving. For a brief second, I glimpsed the boy he must have been. Taught that love meant attachment, taught that attachment meant possession. But sympathy is not the same as obligation. I understand you're hurting, I said. But I'm not your support system. His breathing quickened. So you don't care at all? You walked out and now. No, I cut in. I do care that you're human and hurting. But caring doesn't obligate me to give up my boundaries. He went silent. A charged, brittle silence. My mother apologized to you, he said finally. Didn't that mean anything? It meant she understood herself, I replied. It didn't undo the past. He exhaled sharply. I just thought, after everything, you could at least talk to me. Talking isn't what you want, I said gently. You want someone to absorb your pain so you don't have to face it. That's not fair, he whispered. It's the truth, I said. And truth is what you've avoided your entire life. Another silence. This one felt less angry, more stunned, like no one had ever spoken freely to him before. Then what am I supposed to do? He asked. Grow, I said. On your own. His breath hitched. I don't know how. That's not my responsibility to teach you. He didn't argue. Not this time. He simply whispered, okay, and hung up. I stared at the phone afterward, not shaken, but strangely steady. Because the call wasn't about him pulling me back. It was about me recognizing how far forward I'd already moved. Jonathan wrapped his arms around me. You handled that with grace. I handled it with boundaries, I corrected softly. He smiled. Same thing sometimes. But with the past finally contained, an opportunity arises. One that will transform Addison's pain into a platform far larger than she ever imagined. By spring, the series Elena and I published had gained traction beyond anything we expected. A women's advocacy organization reached out, requesting a workshop. Then a counseling center. Then a podcast. People weren't just reading. They were hungry for understanding. Elena and I agreed to host a live seminar. Silence is not peace. Recognizing emotional erosion early. The night before the event, I felt a flicker of nerves, old remnants of the woman who once apologized for her existence. But stepping onto the stage beside Elena, seeing rows of faces looking up with hope, not judgment, something settled inside me. These people weren't here to watch me shrink. They were here to learn how not to. Elena opened with her story. Concise, powerful, focused on patterns, not wounds. Then I spoke about mine. I didn't describe the Christmas insult or the confrontation at work. Instead, I spoke about subtleties, the gradual dimming, the self-doubt disguised as loyalty, the moments when I thought peace meant staying quiet. Abusive dynamics rarely start loud, I told them. They start quiet. With a small comment that stings but you brush off. A tiny boundary you let slide. A silence you choose because arguing feels harder. Heads nodded throughout the room. But silence isn't peace, I said. It's erosion. And one day, you wake up and realize there's less of you left than you remember. After the seminar, people lined up to speak with us. Some cried. Some thanked us. Some whispered confessions they'd never said aloud. One woman said, I didn't realize what was happening in my marriage until I heard you talk. I'm leaving tonight. Her voice didn't tremble. It radiated relief. This purpose, began stitching me back together in ways survival alone never had. Later, as Elena and I packed up materials, she smiled. You're good at this. So are you. We should keep doing it, she said. Workshops. Articles. Maybe even a book. The idea startled me. But in a good way. I think yes. Yes, we should. When I returned home that night, Jonathan was waiting with dinner and candles. To celebrate, he said with a grin. Celebrate what? You stepping into the life you were meant for. I laughed. That dramatic? Yes, he said. And not enough. We ate, we talked, and at one point he reached across the table and took my hand. You turned the worst chapter of your life into a lifeline for other people. That's more than healing. Addison. That's transformation. I looked at him, really looked at him. The kindness, the stability, the quiet confidence that never once asked me to shrink. This is the first time, I said softly, that That I feel like I'm not reacting to my past. I'm shaping my future. And I meant it. Silence is not peace. Voice is power. I had lived the first. Now I was choosing the second. But as Addison's mission expands, one final encounter awaits. One that will bring her journey full circle and give her the ending she never expected. I didn't expect to visit Judith again. Her apology had offered all the closure I needed. Succinct, clear, without manipulation. But when the care facility called to notify me that her condition had worsened and that she had added me, of all people, to her approved visitors, I felt something like a tug inside me. Not obligation. Not sentimentality. Just curiosity about what unfinished piece she believed still existed. Jonathan didn't question my decision to go. You won't lose yourself, he said. Not anymore. The facility felt quiet, understated, like a place designed for soft landings. Judith was propped up in bed, wrapped in a pale quilt. Her posture, once rigid and commanding, had softened under the weight of time and illness. When she looked up, surprise mingled with relief. You came, she whispered. I did. She studied me for a long moment, as if confirming something she'd only recently begun to believe. You look strong, she said. You always were. I just didn't know how to see it. I took a seat beside her bed. Why did you ask for me? Her eyes drifted toward the window. Because I wanted to tell you something before I go. Something not even Tyler knows. I waited. When I married Howard, she began slowly, I was young. Insecure. I thought the only way to matter was to make myself indispensable. When Tyler was born, he became the proof that I had purpose. I clung to that. Too tightly. Her voice wavered. I feared irrelevance more than anything. Every woman who came close to him became a threat. You. Elena. Others. I wasn't protecting him. I was protecting the image of myself I was terrified to lose. She paused, catching her breath. I didn't know how to let him grow up. I didn't know how to let anyone grow beside him either. So I tried to shrink the women who came into his life instead. There was no excuse in her tone, just tired honesty. I watched you try, she continued, even when I made it impossible. I see now that you were never the problem. I was. Her confession didn't make my chest tighten the way I expected. Instead, it created a sense of spaciousness, as if an old, heavy door finally settled into its frame. I hope, she whispered, that you found the freedom I never gave you. I did, I said softly. And I'm using it well. A faint smile touched her lips. Good. That is very good. For a moment, the room felt peaceful, not because the past was repaired, but because its shape was finally understood. I stood to leave. Judith reached for my wrist, not gripping, just touching lightly. Thank you for coming, she said. It means something. I nodded. Goodbye, Judith. When I stepped back into the hallway, the air felt lighter, the edges of the world sharper. I realized then that this wasn't a moment of forgiving. It was a moment of release. Silence is not peace. Voice is power. Understanding is freedom. I walked out carrying all three. With Judith's final confession behind her, Addison now faces the last unresolved question. What does she want her life to become next? After visiting Judith, something inside me shifted subtly but unmistakably. Not a dramatic revelation. More like a realignment. I wasn't haunted anymore. I wasn't running. I wasn't reacting. I had stepped fully into authorship of my own story. The workshops Elena and I hosted continued to grow. Each session brought new faces, some fearful, some exhausted, many quietly hopeful. As I listened to their stories, I realized the themes were nearly universal. People mistaking suppression for compromise. People believing tolerance was a virtue, even when it erased them. People taught that love required enduring rather than choosing. Our work wasn't just about relationships. It was about identity. One afternoon, after a session in a community center with bright yellow walls and a perpetually humming vending machine, Elena turned to me and said, "Do you ever imagine where you'd be if you hadn't left?" I considered it. A smaller version of myself, I replied. Someone who kept folding to fit into the shape others made for her. And now? She asked. Now I make my own shape. Jonathan noticed the shift in me too. One night, while we cooked dinner, he said, "You don't brace anymore." Brace. For impact, he said. For criticism. For someone to tell you you're too much. I paused, spoon suspended above a simmering pot. I didn't realize I stopped. You did, he said. You take up space now. You speak without apologizing for existing. I felt a warmth rise in my chest, not because he said it, but because I recognized the truth in it. My life expanded in ways I didn't anticipate. A promotion at work. A podcast interview. A surprising invitation to contribute to a book on emotional resilience. But the biggest shift was internal. I had stopped living in reaction to what broke me and started living in pursuit of what built me. One evening, while reviewing a new draft with Elena, she said, "We should write a full book." I looked up sharply. A book? Yes. A guide. A memoir. Both. Something that says what no one ever said to us when we needed it. The idea scared me, and thrilled me. I went home and told Jonathan. He didn't hesitate. You should absolutely do it. You've already changed lives. Addison. Why not amplify that? I sat in my office later that night, notebook open, fingers hovering. Then I wrote the first line. Silence is not peace. This is the story of how I learned to speak again. And the rest followed, slow but certain, like the first steps of a long walk I was finally ready to take. My life no longer revolved around escaping the past but around choosing the future. Deliberately, courageously. Every day felt like another brick in the foundation I was building. Not for stability alone but for meaning. Addison's new foundation is strong, but one final moment awaits, a closing of the circle that will define the emotional core of her journey. The call came 3 weeks later. Judith had passed away quietly in her sleep. I wasn't listed as family, of course, but the facility had included me on a courtesy note. Not out of obligation. Out of recognition. When I told Jonathan, he took my hand. How do you feel? I thought about it. Really thought. I feel done, I said. Not relieved. Not mournful. Just finished. There was no funeral invitation, no request to attend. Even if there had been, I wouldn't have gone. My closure had already happened in that quiet room where Judith shared the truth she'd spent decades avoiding. Still, I walked to the river that evening, a place where I often gathered my thoughts. The water moved steadily beneath the bridge, unconcerned with the histories carried above it. I remembered the woman I was when I first entered Judith's home. Tentative, hopeful, eager to belong. And I remembered the woman who walked out on Christmas night. Shaken, but awakening. Now, standing at the river's edge, I felt the presence of a third woman, the one I had become. She wasn't defined by pain anymore. She wasn't shaped by silence. She wasn't waiting for someone to validate her worth. She was whole because she built herself that way. My phone buzzed. A message from Elena. Workshop registration hit capacity again. We're helping people. Addison. Really helping them. I smiled. Let's keep going, I replied. Another message arrived. This one from my editor at the advocacy group. Your manuscript outline is beautiful. When you're ready, let's finalize chapter structure. The life unfolding around me felt wide open. Not because it was easy but because it was mine. Jonathan joined me at the river shortly after. He slipped his arm around my waist. Want company? Always, I said. We watched the sun sink into the horizon, casting warm light across the water. The world felt expansive, like a place that invited me to keep stepping forward. You know, he said quietly, you didn't just survive what happened. You transformed it. I nodded. Everyone survives something. But transformation, that's a choice. He smiled. And you keep choosing. Yes, I did. And I would continue choosing. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the wind move across my skin. Then I whispered the words that had guided me through every chapter of this story. Silence is not peace. Voice is power. And then I added the final truth, the one I'd earned not through suffering, but through rebuilding. And I choose my own life. Those were the final lines of the story, not because nothing more would happen, but because everything that came next would be written by me, not by pain, not by fear, and certainly not by silence. The circle had closed. My future had opened. Yendi.